it's 95% of your problems come from 1%. So actually, we were just doing a testimonial and with a bar and nightclub, and at the front of their door, it says "No assholes allowed." And what it means, and what I take it as, it's just setting the tone. It's setting a tone that this place is a place meant to be safe. You're meant to have fun, and we just gotta deter or prevent the 1% or the assholes from coming in, or holding them accountable if they do. So what ends up happening is, in the old days, and when I say old days, maybe in my days, there'd be a 3-ring binder that you would write names in, and Alberio spoke to some of the other systems that would be out there. Every once in a while, they would have Polaroids that they would take of these people, or they had a camera shot and they would put it up and they'd line it on the wall, trying to help their staff to identify these individuals and make sure they didn't come in, because usually they're repeat offenders. Usually they're up to no good. And again, it's a small percentage of people, but they can ruin everybody's night. So we have all these scanners all over the US and Canada and beyond. But when you have all of them, and then now you have the information that goes along with it, and you can identify these bad actors and then open it up. If they've been egregious, some of the worst things that can be out there, you can share that to your community.
Hello again. Here I am back with my very exotic accent. Nowadays more than ever, but today is so exciting. It's really exciting. Look, we are gonna talk today about our sister company, Patronscan. So I tell you, I'm not sure, but I believe that this is the episode 23, 24? 24. 24th? 26 of Launchcast since we started. And it is so exciting today to talk about the company that actually started all. So our guests today are Alberio Bathory-Frota, which you already know, because he's the CEO of Launchcode, but he's also the CEO of Patronscan, and I actually need to talk about this today. Very, very important. And Jason Swanson, which is the VP of Growth for Patronscan and one of my partners here. We work together, and we are going to be talking about safety, prevention, and peace of mind through ID validation. Is that the right term?
Love it. Perfect.
Validation? Validation. 18 years ago, Alberio and his friend and also business partner, James, they started a 6-month project that wanted to help bars and nightclubs deal with the growing nightlife violence and the fact that was actually impacting the community. Today, Patronscan has North America's largest ID verification validation network that keeps 1 million people safe every week around the world. It's crazy. Actually, I got to talk about the crazy numbers, right? So this is really going to be special. Please stick with us. This is going to be long and most likely a series of episodes. But yes, very, very excited about that. So let's go. Hello again. My name is Buarque. I am part of the executive team for Launchcode, and I'm also part of Patronscan. I'm also supporting this beautiful gentleman here. So join me today again, Patronscan's co-founder and CEO Alberio, and VP of Growth Jason Swanson. So finally, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us, man. It's a beautiful office you have.
Yeah.
I love it. Love what you did with it.
I don't know why this feels like home, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. Kind of see each other every day, talk
Yeah.
every day. So let's make this as a conversation. So first of all, I'll leave to the two of you to introduce yourself. Jason, let's start with you.
Jason Swanson, the VP of Growth with Patronscan. Been here 5 years now. Started with an evolution. Obviously Bar Nightclub was a heavy focus, and we've been expanding and doing into different diverse industries ever since. And it's been a wild ride, especially with COVID mixed in the middle of that. But at the end of the day, the evolution of the product and where we're heading is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that seems to. Before Patronscan, where do you come from? What are you doing?
I would say I came from a very vast amount of experience, but I did spend my last 17 years at Ricoh, which is an office imaging company. Started with the photocopier space and watched that evolution from copying a piece of paper and duplicating it to the image communication, where you start scanning and moving the information, part of your workflow, and then evolved into the digital business digital transformation world. And so we started getting into document retention policies. And now that you have all this information digitally, what are you going to do with it? How do you move it? You do it for archive and you do it for moving. Yeah. So all of that stuff kind of just kept evolving from a pretty rudimentary product to ever expanding software and engagement. And kind of when we got into the Patronscan, when I moved over here, there was a lot of synergies as far as stuff that I was learning about the back end. And we'll talk about privacy and security, and then now you have it. What do you do with it from a cloud technology and so on? So it was just a good evolution from where I was before, because I was always in the scanning business per se, but now we're scanning documents at the minute level and the micro level, from pixels and all that stuff. So there's a little bit of overlap from my background for sure.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, that's interesting. I've actually never thought about that. It was just like scanning stuff. And at the end of the day, we don't say ID scanning, right? We use ID validation, but at the end of the day, we're also scanning documents. So it's interesting. I never thought about that.
It's technically Scan Man, our internal mascot here. So
yeah,
it's great.
It is what?
Scan Man.
Our mascot, yeah. We got a suit for him and everything.
Well, we have an idea. It's in the books of if everybody saw Terry Tate, Office Linebacker. That was kind of an idea where you put Scan Man, where you get the black T-shirt and you got the RoboCop type glasses.
Really?
And then you basically, our scanner is acting like a digital version of never gets tired, rain or shine, it's always working, all these fun stuff that can have fun with.
Okay, somebody gives you fake ID, he tackles them down to the ground.
That's right. That's right. I tackle them. So, and I ex-football player, so I think I might be able to, actually, I know what I can do there.
Actually, let me take on that. So
you'll be the dummy?
No, not that, but the fact that you were also a football player, football coach for many years, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's my sporting background. I played a lot of sports growing up, but fell in love with the sport of football. And I'll say that I'm maybe a hockey player a little bit before that, a little bit maybe more aggressive style kind of person. Ended up taking on football, which I ended up becoming a quarterback. So quarterbacks, typically you're not going to have them too fired up, and you have to be calm, cool, collected, and that was something I had to work hard at back in the day. But there's a lot of lessons, I'll tell you. Like I coached, not only played football for a while, but I also ended up coaching. And in that coaching realm, being able to learn how to build and build a process of winning, and how to create an environment of people that were like-minded, all trying to work towards the same goal, and then creating processes and systems around making it continuous, so you always have a chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then right down to the minute level of teaching people all the little nuance of technique to succeed. Yeah. And so all those learnings really gave me a sense of how to build a culture of winning, how to build that culture of success. And again, a lot of it is starting with that big goal, right? Yeah, the BHAG, as some people would say, that big, hairy, audacious goal. We always had that in football, because it was always, let's win a championship. Yeah. So we always had the goal was number one, and everything else was worked backwards from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so
makes sense, yeah.
that training really prepared me for a lot of things in my professional life, from when I was a sales rep down the street selling stuff to a sales manager, to a VP, to a sales director, and now a VP of growth, where now marketing and sales come up to me. And I think the one thing that's really interesting is that my background's not in marketing, but knowing the system of learning and knowing how to educate yourself. And the one thing I've learned probably the most about marketing is there's more do than learn. Like you can learn a little bit, but you just got to get in there and do it, because
skin in the game, right?
You got to figure it out.
That's how you're gonna learn.
And that's where we're starting to set, and then really listening to other people and really getting the advice of people that have been there, done that, and then taking your own intuition that goes with it a little bit and go after it. So all those things can go back to football and my background in that.
It's interesting how everything is connected and together, and we put everything on the table, and Patronscan benefits of all of that, right? And of course, Launchcode, right? So at the end of the day, you and I talk about everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, it's not limited to just
It's not
Patronscan.
limited to that.
We get to talk about Launchcode and some of the areas of focus there and how I can support you on that level, and just like you support me on the Patronscan side.
Absolutely. And it's a beautiful synergy.
Love it.
So you are unknown to the audience.
Yes,
so
I'll introduce myself. Yeah. Alberio, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Patronscan. Been around here since day one. So that's about 17 years these days.
18 years, no?
18 years
2005?
in December.
2005.
In December it's going
And
to be 18
December
years.
is going to be 18 years.
So 1 month away. But yeah, been around along that trajectory. Also started and co-founded and am CEO of Launchcode. Kind of wearing both hats right now, which makes it easy when you have such a phenomenal team on both companies that are basically self-sufficient. So that's the trajectory of my roles in both organizations. My background is one of tech. I love tech. I did my undergrad in computing science, but I also love business. So part of my undergrad I did in business. I also did my MBA when I lived in Victoria, and I just absolutely love that intersection of the business side, but how to be innovative in business. How can you bring a greater sense of passion through technology? So that's the stuff that really drives me. I started, we co-founded Patronscan, my business partner and I, James, when I lived at that time I was in Victoria.
It was Victoria, right?
Yeah.
Because that's Victoria. Where you actually graduated, right? You are...
My MBA, yeah.
Oh, it was your MBA,
yeah. So I was born in Brazil, as you know.
Of course.
And I moved to Canada when I was 9 and lived in Edmonton. So perfect, just the right amount of time to be an Oilers fan. That has now brought me a lot of the opposite of joy
Right now.
for the last few years. But anyways, so I grew up in Edmonton. Early 20s, I actually ended up moving down to California. I lived in the US for a bit. Moved back to Victoria when I got married and had kids there. And when I was in Victoria, I did my MBA.
Because
I graduated from my MBA in Victoria.
But because your degree was University of Alberta.
It was. Yeah,
that's when you met your wife.
That is right. Yeah.
There you go.
So my undergrad was in Edmonton. I did my master's in Victoria. When I actually lived in Edmonton, James, my business partner and co-founder on the Patronscan side and on Launchcode side too, he was a friend of mine back then, and it was just one of those guys that was good at whatever he did, and so we friendship blossomed. We used to hang out all the time, played sports all the time, and it was interesting because every time we played a sport, it would get uber competitive to the point where it would go down to like the last point possible,
Wow.
So I played tennis, and go to the last point, and depending on who you ask these days, I won or he won, Still,
that's how
still
competitive it was.
Yes, and this is kind of why we have a squash court at their office too, right? So we used to play squash back then. I started the U of A squash club at that time. Did a few tournaments. He'd come and we'd play together. We loved the sport. But I always knew that the guy is extremely capable, a guy that I absolutely love doing things with. And one day when I was living in Victoria, he calls me up and says, "Hey, do you want to start a business together?" Right? By then, I had already started one with when I did my undergrad. That basically paid for my school. When I did my undergrad, he had started one as well, car-based business. And so when he called me, I was like, "Yeah, for sure. This is the guy that I'd love to partner up with. Very, very capable. Everything he did, he always did phenomenal at it." So we got together, and what was interesting is that where a lot of startup journeys start because you find a problem, you want to solve it. With this one, it was, here's a partnership that I think could be phenomenal for us to start a business. We agreed upon that, and it's like, okay, well, what should we build, right?
Okay, so that's interesting. So actually started with your friendship, and then your idea of doing something together, but not necessarily an objective of precisely what to do. You guys didn't know at that point.
That's right. Yeah,
That's so
we knew we wanted to do it. Well, definitely knew it was going to be a tech company, right? So
Sure.
he was working in a tech environment as well, writing code. I was as well.
He was a coder back in the days?
He was, yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. So he was a software developer. So he was doing that in a smaller organization. I was in the government at the time, so we kind of had both worlds, which is great. And we knew we wanted to start something, and right off the bat, I loved the idea of having a company that put out products, right, and put out valuable products that we could build upon the future. So we're chatting about this. Well, what could be the first problem that we want to solve? What is the first solution that we want to create to solve a bigger problem? And at that time in Edmonton, there was a lot of issues in the bar nightclub scene. In Vancouver, there was a massive issue with gang violence. So Vancouver actually started an association called Bar Watch at the time, and all the members that were part of Bar Watch, so these would be bars and nightclubs. Any member that was a part of Bar Watch can deny you entry if you were known to be, either a gang member or if you had caused an issue in any of the other bars.
That is interesting. So they already had kind of a flag network.
They did.
Back there. Once
Yes.
you want manual, maybe some spreadsheets, maybe mail that would be sending.
And that's what we knew we could solve. It was
got it.
manual.
It was manual.
Yeah, piece of paper. And they would write the names and they would share it among the other clubs.
Through the association.
Exactly. And then now the bouncers would look at all the names, try to memorize it before the night opened.
Yeah.
And then as they're looking and checking people's ID, they would try to see if they remember that name from the list.
That's crazy.
And as you can tell, there's hundreds of people, maybe even thousands of people on this list. It's not secure by any means because it's a little notebook that somebody could take
Pretty
with
much,
them.
Yeah.
But it would have that information on there, and they were, expected to memorize it. So we knew we could come in and do a better job of what existed. We weren't the first one in the market to build a product like this. Technically, we were the third. So there was two bigger companies than us already when we came in. And but we knew we could do a much better job than what already existed. So we set aside. Both of us didn't come from money. We didn't have investors. We didn't really know people with money. So we bootstrapped. Mm-hmm. And our trajectory is one of a complete bootstrap one. So I had a full-time job. He had a full-time job. At the time I had a daughter that was about to be born, Rain. Mm-hmm. And I was also doing my MBA, so toying with that idea. I hadn't fully started my MBA yet, but I was toying with that idea. And so my basic day looked like going on my full-time job, taking some breaks throughout the day, calling customers, seeing if they'd be interested in it, taking some downtime to program the software. At home, you're basically, as soon as you get home, you're programming and you're doing support and all of that. He was doing the exact same thing on his side, right? So him and I were basically working a couple full-time jobs just to get this thing off the ground. I remember there was a time there, by the time my son was born, so I had now two kids under the age of 3. I was doing my MBA in the evenings, and I still had a full-time job, and I was dealing with the Patronscan side of the business, right?
Wow.
And so it was
For how long that?
that was for a few years, So, even James as well, he's working full-time job and doing this full-time. He was the first one that we ended up going full-time for the company. So once we had enough revenue to pay somebody's salary, he was the first one to go full-time for the company. And then I followed shortly thereafter. But, it's a different trajectory. Bootstrapping forces you to focus on what's important, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
If you can raise money, that's always nice because you can grow really fast, but you have to have a tremendous amount of organization and a tremendous amount of internal processes, so you're not just wasting money and running out of that money really fast, right?
Nowadays, it's very common, right? Some startups, right? They're not ready for that kind of investment, so they grab a lot of money and they now got to figure it out quickly.
Yes.
How to use that money wisely.
Yeah.
But organization and processes and systems, they take time.
Yeah.
It's not day and night. That involves people. So
and
so
the
very
discipline.
interesting. And the discipline.
I think the
right?
discipline, if you do get the money, to make sure that each stage of that money is being valuable and being used at the level that you intend. You have everything you have is good intentions. going, yeah, we need this because it's broken. We need to fix it. So boom, throw some money at it. Boom.
Absolutely.
But if there's no one monitoring, there's no one kind of ensuring it, or it's
you don't have the
with
checks
one
and balances.
person, the checks and balances that
Right?
go with it, exactly.
Yeah.
And
so
that's
the-
interesting because that's the history of Patronscan. Of course, Launchcode, but the history of Patronscan is bootstrapped all the way. That's the story you tell. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
In the middle of it, if you could, if we could come back in time, and now you have an investor ready to invest in both of you, believe in the idea, would that be different? Would you do differently, knowing what you know back
No,
there?
I don't think so.
You still would go bootstrapped.
Yeah. You know why? Because it was a lesson. It's like, it's like an MBA that you get over the course of 10 years, basically. The struggling MBA. You don't learn that in business school. But the struggle of the bootstrap forces you to focus on what matters, which is get the product out the door, get a customer paying for it. And if the customer is paying for it but doesn't like it, iterate, make it so that it's actually valuable and works for something. It focuses you to understand what it is that you're trying to solve and the value you can provide, and it focuses you to focus on on the actual client. Because I find that if you have money in the bank, and you're not struggling to get revenue in the door to pay the bills, you can be a little bit detached from your customer, from your client.
That makes sense.
You can not care as much if they complain or if it's not working for them, because you can say, okay, well, maybe that's
You
not
have
the
that
right
safety net
You do.
available for you.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So another question on that, because so Patronscan is built out of pure entrepreneurship, right? Pure entrepreneurship, right? Like bootstrapped, 2 guys working full time, and building something. Which, by the way, back on the days, and I think it would be very interesting talking to the director here, guys. It would be very interesting for us to have some images of the early Patronscan products, because you need to understand what we're talking about here. You got to understand that it's not digital only; it's hardware, and we're gonna put some stuff here. I'm gonna ask our editor, to put some of the images so you can take a look and you can understand how difficult it was 18 years ago to build this technology. So
there's some great pictures actually of
we do,
of
right?
James. Basically, he'd go to the scrapyard and find like aluminum sheets of metal and then weld the thing together.
And he had done that himself.
He did that himself. Yeah, a lot of those units he built himself, man. And he would weld it together. He would power sand to get this thing really beautiful, clean, and then we'd have to go, drop it off at the client's location.
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing everything from manufacturing to installation, training, the sales calls, all of that, the support, you're doing basically every single aspect of the business, the invoicing, all the accounting in the back end.
Express MBA with a huge amount of stress.
Yeah. Well, and this is what I love about it too, right? Like the first few units you make, the first unit we ever made was made out of wood. And he made it in his garage.
Okay.
And you're basically finding things that are off the shelf. You're finding pieces of items that you can put together. And by the time you're done, the amount of hours you put in, you look at this and you're like, "There's no way this thing is scalable. There's absolutely no way you can make this thing in quantity and make money off of it."
Yeah.
But that's not the lens at the time. At the time, you're just thinking, "Can I put something in somebody's location and they use it and they tell me if it works or not, and if it doesn't, what can I do to fix it?" Right? So we're not really even thinking about how to mass manufacture this thing and all that. We're just rapid prototyping and putting this thing out in the client's door as fast as possible. Our first unit, I think, was from the time we started developing it to the time it was at a client's location, I think it was like 4 months. Right? And then nowadays, like you can look at some companies that'll spend a couple of years developing a product before anybody ever uses it.
Yeah, makes
And
sense.
I like the one thing to add to that, your story was the first innovation was you did that, and then you're like, well, we found out the glass was a problem and could get scratched. So your first innovation was, a removable slidable glass.
Yes, that's right.
Like, so I just
Yeah.
think of like the iteration that kept happening, going, okay, here it is, and then boom, oh my God, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Then your next version, you know, which I think was the White Beauty. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know all the different names that we have
Yeah.
for it. We have the Smithsonian here of all the product
Yeah.
just over here, but that kind of talks to the evolution of the hardware side. It just constant feedback,
Yeah.
getting the information back from the clients to make small changes
Yeah.
at a rapid pace
Yep.
to get the adoption to the point of people loving the brand,
Yeah.
loving the product. So you're right. It comes down to product and sales. That's
It
kind of,
does.
and I think a lot of people would kind of agree with you.
That is pretty cool. So only with those introductions we can see there's so many layers, right? So many things that we could talk about. And again, all of them involving Patronscan, because we are talking about 18 years with constant innovation. So I think that's how that's what we were talking before, like small innovation, like the whole glass thing, whatever, that's innovation. How can we change that? Plus bootstrapping all the way. And I think that's a valuable conversation that we can talk a little bit later today, even in another episode, that is going to be, it's valuable for young entrepreneurs, or maybe, you know, executives like ourselves are actually now, you know, doing some entrepreneurship, right? And that's a great lesson. And the third one, it is the purpose of what Patronscan is. I know it started as this bar and nightclub thing, but now 18 years later, Patronscan is a different beast, right? We have purpose, right? We're aiming for something. So I want to make sure that we tackle a little bit of all of that together, plus some other stuff that we have in here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit of the biggest challenges in terms of developing that technology. So let's go back a little bit, because that's when we started to develop a technology to identify IDs, right? So tell us a little bit about that. How was that?
Yeah, it's definitely a massive challenge, especially, you know, 10 plus years ago, when image calculations and image recognition software didn't really exist. So, you know, and like I said, we weren't the first one in the market. So there were a couple other products out there.
Canada?
In Canada, there was a couple products that did the bar nightclub space, which we were doing. However, they didn't write their own software. They sub-licensed software, and we took a look at that. We actually started with that. We sub-licensed a piece of software out of the US that, you know, and I had a hardware piece. You put an ID on it, it would recognize the ID and it would read the details off the ID. The only thing is because they were out of the US, they did a really good job with American IDs and an absolutely atrocious job with Canadian IDs, to the point where we couldn't even put it out, because it would be so many errors on reading the specific ID. So we decided, you know, being software developers, why don't we try to tackle this challenge of writing code that can actually recognize an identification and recognize the components within it, and then extract the details off of it, right? Back then, there wasn't a tremendous amount of AI tools, but we were actually tapping into some AI algorithms already. And that's really what we did, is we found some image recognition algorithms that were just kind of coming out. Some of it was even just stuff that was coming out of universities and in thesis projects, and we decided to build our own piece of technology, and we started with our own backyard. So, you know, we already had some devices out there that was using the sub-licensed software, and one night we decided to basically replace one of our clients' machines with ours.
Got it. Okay,
we did that, and I think we read probably 10% of the IDs. That's how bad it was. But that is the trajectory of what Patronscan was and still is. It's that constant innovation, right? So day one, maybe it's 10% effective. Day two, now, you know, Friday was day one. Saturday is day two. I think we already read about 50 to 60%. You know, by the next weekend, we were reading 80% of the IDs, and within a couple of weeks, it was reading 100%.
That's fast.
Yeah.
So every single day, you guys would come back and then see, okay,
real time.
Real time.
Yeah,
that's
basically real time. We're taking a look at what was reading, what wasn't reading. We're programming. You know, we're up late at night, pulling all-nighters, programming the code, doing everything, and so that by next day, it would be a markedly improvement.
Okay, but back in the days, we have to go there, deploy that to the machine.
Yeah.
because nowadays we can send over the internet, right? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So they had the physical machine. We could still, at that time, we could update them remotely.
Oh, you
because
could?
Yeah,
Okay.
we had internet access to them. But
of course it was 2005. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, no, that was, that's kind of one of our biggest. That's one of our biggest value propositions that we have. Really, it's that laser-like focus to our client success. So with that client, they knew when it was going to be a problem. Maybe they expected it to be better within a couple months, but us internally, we didn't want that experience one more night, and they should have to, right? So we really made sure that we worked as hard as we could to kind of iterate, innovate, put something better, have it in their hands, and they were really thankful about that. There's stories too in the past where we'd go to a new city, for example. When we first broke into the United States, we read Canadian IDs really well. As soon as we broke into the United States, it was doing okay job the first night. When we were talking with our clients, they call us and they say, "Hey, we just tried to scan a bunch of Nevada IDs and none of them scan." And we'd say, "Okay, well, give us a few minutes." Literally in about 10, 15 minutes, we were able to build that in, send them a release, and within half an hour, they were already reading those IDs again. So,
Wow.
and it was always the same reaction that we'd get from them, which was, "Holy smokes, you guys are fast." That's phenomenal service, and that's really what allowed us to kind of penetrate the market and become bigger than those competitors that already existed. It was just our real deep focus on customer service at the time. And we were a small company.
So so the company evolved,
Yeah.
absolutely, and this whole ID validation and the industry has evolved. The needs of the customer evolved, right? And Jason, you've been here for 5 years, and I know you know so much about this evolution from 5 years until now. So where's the market now when we think about ID validation?
The market is so endless. So one thing that we've identified is ID verification is not going away. It's not something less important. If anything, what COVID's taught us is that it's uber important, it's super important. People need to know who they're doing business with. So we talk a lot about it's two things: safety and trust, right? Safety and trust. So safety, and that all evolved from the bar nightclub space. So we put a lot of time and attention to that as keeping people safe, having peace of mind at the end of the night. And the other side of that is trust. So that's trustworthy relationships. And that's done typically through your identity. So if that identity is legit, if that identity is you are who you say you are, then you feel comfortable in doing a transaction with that person, interacting with that person, whatever it may be. So when we get into COVID times, there was starting to become a lot more e-commerce. So people were even doing more stuff. So if you can buy a fake ID, and this is just get into the fake ID world, fake ID, over 9 million of them came to the US last year. That's coming from the 9 million.
9 million?
New fake IDs,
New fake IDs?
that came over to the US last year. And it's even more than that if you start including Canada and beyond.
Wow, that's crazy.
Which again, and then they say that 59% of people under 20 years old admits to having one. And so we talk about that, but they started, and it's like $40. So we always say it's like cheap, easy to get, near perfect. These IDs. These aren't your dad's favorite, your fake IDs, or even ours when we were a kid, where you kind of manipulated a document or something like that. We're talking like they're printed on the same printing devices that the DMV has and otherwise. So the sophistication has leveled up. They're not expensive, so you can go as low as $40. Somewhere the better ones are in that $400 range. But they come tied with a credit card. They come with a bill, a bill of your address, so they can. So it's gotten elaborate. It's gotten sophisticated, and then so it's one thing to go into a bar or nightclub and get in there, there's kind of that, like a wink and a nudge, and, like catching them and all that. It's all about compliance and trying to keep underagers out. But when you start seeing the evolution of how these IDs are being used and to get access to what, so they're buying cars, stealing cars through these rental car services. We had a situation where one person stole 38 cars within a short period of time, all with the same fake ID. These kind of
Different
things.
stores.
Different stores, because they found out it worked. It was so easy.
crazy.
Here's my fake ID. Sign up. take the car and never come back. They go to the next one, do the same thing.
It's crazy.
Because no one
I
had
have
it.
a question on that. So,
Yeah.
so back in the days, the lack of sophistication, I'm assuming, would allow someone to kind of look to a fake ID and maybe just using their vision, right? They would say, okay, this is fake or not.
Yeah.
Okay, nowadays, I'm assuming for what you're saying that it's almost impossible for you to
I'll
Yeah,
tell you.
detect
it's
that manually, right?
Yeah, and it's just like Jason mentioned, these IDs are starting to be printed at professional print places where they use the same printers as the issuing authority, same places as the DMVs in the U.S. or the service centers here up in Canada. And so when you get these things, the template is nearly flawless. And what's really interesting is if somebody's going to do identity theft, and when they do that is they use somebody else's information on that ID, and it's real information. So it'd be your name, your address, your date of birth, but then it would have my picture on it, right? So now I can go buy a Mercedes and do, or sometimes it's even happening with houses with somebody's different information and never return the product or get the funds for the house, for example, where I was never the owner of the house to begin with. So when it gets to that point, these fake ID manufacturers are now starting to make a lot of money because there's a lot of demand, and they're charging a little bit of a premium for better quality fake IDs. So in back in the day, you could take a look at it, and if it was your ID in your province, you'd probably be able to tell for sure. But if somebody was presenting you an ID from a different province, maybe you don't know. Nowadays, when you look at it, even if it's a bouncer in their own state and all they've seen is that ID over and over and over, and they see a fake ID, a lot of times they'll say, yeah, that's a real ID. And that's where technology now, we can use it and really advance it, right? So with advancements in optical character resolution, and then also with advances in the actual algorithms of image comparisons, with advances in AI, you can take an ID and you can extrapolate about 12,000, anywhere from about 8,000, 12,000 points off of the ID, and then now you can start doing comparisons within each point of the ID. So the human eye kind of sees the major things that's on the ID, whereas a computer can extrapolate that down to the finer details. So you can pick up things like, are they using a slightly different font than what the real issuer does, right? Or do they have some sort of word mark that's on the real ID that the fake one has as well, but is just a little bit off in size or color or actual image on it. So that's where technology can really provide a leaps and bounds advancement from the human eye.
That also requires that the organizations, they always, and a very dumb question, I'm just thinking about on the audience. Not that the audience is dumb, of course very smart, but it's a dumb question from my side because I'm trying to understand better. I'm assuming the organization that creates the driver's licenses, in Alberta, for example, all the driver's license, they follow like the same patterns and the same structure all the way, right?
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes they changed a little bit, and then I'm assuming that we have to retrain and whatever it is. I think it would be interesting to understand, okay, so this is not a static
Environment.
It's not at all.
No.
It's kind of dynamic and changing.
Yeah. It's a cat and mouse game. It's like
It's a cat and mouse game, yeah.
It's like the antivirus game as well. So
how do we tackle that as a company?
Well, it's interesting. It's the constant being in the environment and seeing what's new and coming out.
Got it.
So when a fake ID issuer, when they create a fake ID, they'll use the same template. Okay, so they'll use a template and they'll know algorithms. So if the issuing authority likes to do their numbers in a certain way and it's positioned this way and the font is this way, those guys will know, and they'll create a template, and now they'll make thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions IDs off of that same template. For us, as soon as we see a new template, when we see something a little bit different, the system recognizes it different. As soon as we say, okay, well, this template is fake, we've now caught every ID that was made off of that template.
Got it.
And now they have to create a new template. So it kind of goes back and forth a little bit, right? And for us, the reason we can do this and be so reactive to it so quickly is that we scan about 4 million IDs every month. So every month we have 4 million IDs that goes through one of our locations, one of our scanners, and through that we can identify these fakes as soon as they hit the market. And out of those 4 million IDs, we're in a lot of places where fake IDs are very prevalent, which is bars and nightclubs. So now we use our prevalence in bars and nightclubs, the fact that they're going to be seeing the most recent fake templates. We can build that in, and now we can leverage that technology and that IP into more corporate, more enterprise clients. Where the loss is much higher.
So the bars and nightclubs field, that's where we started, and that's of course so Patronscan is present now in different industries, right? I know we're going to talk about the future soon, but what you're saying is that it's actually the fact that we are, kind of an authority in that industry, right? That and we're present so many places, and grabbing that kind of data, we're actually also learning every single day whatever is happening that is new out there. That's what I understood what you were saying.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and I think to add to the point is we kind of leverage the community. So we have this huge community of bar and nightclubs that are the first ones to see this. So we actually crowdsource these fake IDs and get them to help it. So it's the community helping itself, in essence. So it's not, and when you think about that, they are on the front line, and there are little things that a human can tell that we can't tell from a technology, vice versa. Obviously, there are things that we can see that they can't see. So working together is always the best situation. So every once in a while, they're going to catch somebody that they actually trip up on what they say. They trick them or whatever. And again, we do have challenge questions that we build into the system that helps these doormen to have quick little questions to ask to validate that person. It looks pretty real. It's kind of on the cusp, and they're able to go boom, and then they have submit fake ID to us, or our forensic team can go look for those micro flaws, which then we produce out, and then catches a whole bunch of fake IDs on that.
Okay.
So it's a community. So the people that sign on to our product are part of it. They're part of the product. They're making it better every day, and we're encouraging them to do that because and I think that shouldn't go unnoticed. And I think the one thing to mention on this side too is one story that's very prevalent and just to say how today these fake IDs, it's just not fair to ask a human to detect it by itself. I had a story where I went into Philadelphia, and there was a doorman there that I just built up a relationship with, real quickly, and we were kind of joking about it. And I just came from a conference where I happened to have a pocket full of IDs, and I was telling him what I do, and he's like, I've been doing it 20 years. I got this down pat. I can nail this thing, no problem. I mean, great. Gave him a stack of IDs. So just tell me which ones are fake. And I go, just so you know, I saw what you did with the people you let in. It was like 10 seconds per ID. You quickly boom, 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 and you're letting them in. But take your time. So he took his time. He went away for half an hour. He had different light sources. He was looking it up. He was bending them. He was doing all the work, everything he's trained to do. Comes back with 2 piles, and I go, which ones are fake? And he goes, those ones. And I go, they're all fake. And he's like, oh my God. He's like, I can't believe how good the fake IDs are these days. Like that's kind of points to 20 years ago. Yeah, you'd be able to scratch, you'd be able to do that, and you'd be able to pick this stuff up.
You didn't have the level of quality at all. It was actually, right.
So I think that's a story to kind of talk about how it's changed, how it's evolved, and the cat and mouse, the constant updates, which is again why we have constant touch points on constant service to our clients. And Alberio talked about success as one of our biggest metrics that we're going for, and that's our client success. Through our client success is our success. So if they're able to catch fake IDs at a certain level, then they're going to have success from a compliance point of view. If they're able to, and we haven't gone into the shared flag network, but that's also a community-driven tool. And to elaborate on that is the fake ID or the flag network is 95% of your problems come from about 1% of your patrons. Mm-hmm. So let's work towards getting that 1% or preventing them from coming in or holding people accountable. So
at least holding people accountable.
That's right. So you got prevention and accountability. That's part of it.
I actually want to talk about that a little bit more. I think it should be important. It would be important for us to talk about the shared flag network.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about privacy and how we deal with that. I think that's very, very important. So what is the shared flag network? Let's start with that. What is the shared flag network?
Well, shared flag network, we spoke a little bit about how we can keep it's 95% of your problems come from 1%. So actually we were just doing a testimonial and with a bar and nightclub, and at the front of their door, it says no assholes allowed. And what it means and what I take it as, it's just setting the tone. It's setting a tone that this place is a place meant to be safe. You're meant to have fun. And we just got to deter or prevent the 1% or the assholes from coming in, or holding them accountable if they do. So what ends up happening is, in the old days, and when I say old days, maybe in my days, there'd be a 3-ring binder that you would write names in, and Alberio spoke to some of the other systems that would be out there. And everybody always wanted to have the 86 list, blacklist, whatever, but it was always internal to yours. Every once in a while, they would have Polaroids that they would take of these people, or they had a camera shot and they would put it up and they'd line it on the wall, trying to help their staff to identify these individuals and make sure they didn't come in, because usually they're repeat offenders. Usually they're up to no good. And again, it's a small percentage of people, but they can ruin everybody's night. So we have this connected network. So we have all these scanners all over the US and Canada and beyond. But when you have all of them, and then now you have the information that goes along with it, and you can identify these bad actors and then open it up. If they've been egregious, some of the worst things that can be out there, you can share that to your community. And so real time, you put them on the system. If that person causes a problem at your club, by the time they stagger down the street to go into the next club that has a Patronscan unit, they already go to scan their ID, and immediately it's going, there's a flag on it with a little bit of a story behind what it is. Again, when we say flag, it's not an indictment. It's literally a note to say, this person caused this problem. You still can let them in. You can choose to do that. But most likely, if you can kind of pivot them and move them on their way, the rest of the people in that bar that night is going to have a good time. And they're not going to have a bad time. So when we start sharing that information, it holds people accountable. And I'd say there's a whole bunch of benefits that come from it, because you start talking about behavioral changes happen. And I'll tell a specific story to this. Is in Sacramento. Someone did a pretty bad thing, and we'll just kind of leave it at that, put on the network, and he tried to get in the bar the next day. Immediately there's a flag on his nut, and they said, no, you're not getting in here. But it was a different bouncer. It's a different doorman. So he wouldn't have known that it was that this person had done something, but thank goodness for the system. Tried to get in the next week, again denied. Then he realized that there's 38 other bars in that city with our system. Well, he tried and can't get into places. So he actually came back with his tail between his legs and profusely apologized to the owner of the bar for what he had done. And she at that time said, you know what? I appreciate that, but what you did was unacceptable. You're going to have to pay a little longer. So there was this a little bit of, but there was a conversation, and then he came back one more time and showed real remorse. And she took him off the system, allowed him back in, and then changed his behavior.
Wow.
So when he goes out at night, he is different because of the accountability that was put into the system, because of the penalties that was addressed to him. So that just tells you a little bit how it works. And the cool thing about it is, again, we talked about connection between the bars. When we talk about the fake ID crowdsourcing, well, this is also a connection of that community where right now, what they do in the absence of us, sometimes they got a little WhatsApp group, and they'll go, hey, watch out for the guy in the black shirt walking down the street. He's up to no good. Not very accurate, all that kind of stuff that goes with it. So they're trying to do the same thing, but that's what our system does. It's helping each other out. So it's helping themselves out. So the more bars, more places that have our system, the safer the whole community becomes. And where I can evolve that to is when we start having conversations at the Sociable City Network, or Sociable City Summit, where this is the venue owners mixing with the city, mixing with the police, all trying to come together for the same purpose, and that's to create a safe, vibrant nightlife for the city, because all parties have a part to play in that. Mm-hmm. And them actually trying to work together. Well, we're at the heart of that. We're at the center of that, because we're kind of the prevention accountability tool that makes this all work. And so when we get in those rooms, it's so amazing to see all these people, stakeholders, key stakeholders that care. They care about the overall safety, but they also care about making money / having a vibrant nightlife.
Of course, yeah.
and having that tourism that comes with that. And they don't want to be a downtown that's dead. They want it to be a little bit lively, but not at the expense of safety. So how do you do that? Well, this is where we get to inject it into the conversation. But again, this is the community helping itself. We're just a technology tool to kind of help them create that network of safety and security that is built into it.
Using one of our analogies, they are the Luke Skywalker.
That's right.
And we're
Yoda.
We're Yoda, right? We're just helping them. Just helping them a little bit. Okay, so can we assume that 99% of the patrons, they are, awesome, no troublemakers, and maybe 1% of the patrons.
Less than 1%.
It's less than 1%?
It's less than 1%. Yeah. Right. And, we have, so there's stats that have been done that through studies, So the government of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, chose our product for one of their areas, King's Cross, which was having a lot of issues. So they chose us as a solution provider, put us in there in all the venues. They did a study a couple years down the road, and they found there's some stats that dramatically reduces the number of incidents that a venue has. And these are bad incidents. It could be things that are violent in nature, and it dramatically reduces that. We've also had other stats that have been done in some of the other venues, like liquor stores, that are using that, where it's 95+% reduction in theft and other type of things that can happen inside a venue. And anecdotally, we've been told by some of our own customers in the bar and nightclub space that as soon as they implemented our system at their venue, it was over 90% reduction, right? So this is what they're telling us. Mm-hmm. This is what we're hearing. So, if you're a venue that you don't want any incident, really, at the end of the day, you don't want anything that makes your, that will create some sort of issue for your patrons, that will, will not have safety for your patrons, and that'll kind of, be bad for the brand as well, right? Tarnish the brand. So having a system like ours can dramatically increase that safety within each venue, which at the end of the day, a lot of the patrons themselves actually like the venue because of that. They like the venue where they can go out and have a good time and not have to be worried about some sort of, violence or any other type of incident within it.
Okay, awesome.
And I think that's a good thing to actually talk a little bit more about, was the patrons that are seeking out our product. Mm-hmm. So they're making choices of which venue to go to based on, do they have Patronscan, because of that essence of that aura of safety that they feel when they get to go into that venue. So, I was just in New York not too long ago, and I got to go to a venue in New York that, did the ID validation, and then they put people in groups of 10 into this little cubicle room where they explained the tone that is meant to be in this bar. And they went through the rules of what's going to happen, and all of it was to set the tone. So they talked about the diversity and inclusion. They talked about unisex bathrooms, and we don't judge it, and all these different things. But what it did is it set the tone. Mm-hmm. And then when we went in with the right mindset, and that's kind of what Patronscan has done, and that's what we see, and especially in women. I'm just going to point to them a little bit more. There is a laundry list of things that women have to think about before going out to a bar as compared to a man. And when women think about going out to a place, they have to consider all these different things based on the fact of some of the situations that they may be privy to. So when you start making a decision, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to some place that doesn't have a process at the front door that's very secure, all that stuff, or someone that has a strict process that is keeping out that less than 1%, or holding people accountable if they do happen to do something where there's a little bit of a accountability built in. So we are seeing it, and we've actually interviewed people going into bars and going, what does that mean to you? What do you think of when you see our system? And the overwhelming thing is, well, I feel like I'm going to be safer. So that's a stamp of approval from us.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
And think about as parents also, right? Mm-hmm. We want to make sure that our kids, they are going into safe places, right? Mm-hmm. It's, one thing. So I've asked about the percentage, because I'm just thinking out loud as a customer of someone that goes to a bar as a potential patron. The last thing that, and I'm part of the 99%. never in my life had any issues with any venue, and that's I'm part of the 99 plus, right? Almost 100%, but 99.5. Let's put that. So the last thing that I want going to a place, doesn't matter if it's a bar or nightclub, the last thing I want, especially going with my wife or going with the kids, my wife and I go to a nightclub, the last thing I want is to go to a place where a fight happens, or drunk people just making us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's the last thing you want, last thing you're looking, right? So now speaking from the 99% perspective, this is, yes, I want to go to a place where I feel safe, and I can see there's technology helping the 99% to be safe, making sure that the 1% or less than 1% are accountable in that sense. So that's pretty cool. But we need to talk about another thing, because share flag network, it means that part of that information is shared among our other Patronscan places, right? And venues. So let's talk about data privacy, right? At the end of the day, we're dealing a little bit of data here. So yeah, what's your policy? What's Patronscan policy around that?
I think what's part of our ethos since day one is when we first came in the market, we wanted to be the most privacy-aware product that existed, which at that time we were. So when we actually came into the market, we decided not to collect everything on the ID, whereas our competitors collected everything that was on the ID and stored all that information. They stored it for long periods of time, and we decided not to do that. So when we first came to the market, we actually, communicated with the Alberta Privacy Commissioner's Office at that time, sent them our privacy impact assessment, privacy risk assessment, and said, hey, what are kind of some of the feedback you have in this technology? And we got some feedback, which we implemented. And since then, we realized that it's better to just get ahead of that concern rather than be something that you think about afterwards. So what does that mean for us? What that means is we always look at that balance. What is the piece of information that you need in order to be effective, and only that and nothing more. And so with that mindset, we have a very limited data set that we collect. So when an ID is scanned at a bar or nightclub, it's the name, date of birth, except for Alberta where we only collect age. We'll have gender in there. Some places collect gender, some don't. And some places will collect the first 3 letters of the postal code. Other places won't as well. So, but really, the name and date of birth is the main pieces that we use in order to match somebody with within the network. Now, that's a lot less information that many other systems out there collect. A lot less information than even social media collects. We don't collect addresses or ID numbers or anything like that. And the other thing is we try to make this as transparent as possible with the actual patrons going into the venue. So at every place that's using Patronscan, there should be a privacy sticker that's pretty prominent. A lot of times it's actually on the kiosk itself that tells you what information is being collected, right? Because some jurisdictions we can collect a little bit different information. So what information is being collected, how long it's being collected for, and then also how to contact us. So on our website, patronscan.com/privacy, there's a URL on every sticker. But if you go there, it'll talk about what information we're collecting, why we're collecting it, who it's disclosed to. We try to make it pretty transparent. We also have a very easy way for those patrons to contact us directly. So they can go on the website, and press a button and fill out a form, and we will tell you what information we have about them. They can call our phone number. We have a privacy line. We have a privacy email. So we make it really easy for them to contact us. And another thing that we do is we want to make sure that even though, let's say, one jurisdiction allows you to do way more, like in the US, we actually have, the flexibility of collecting more information and for longer. What we do is we try to streamline it so that we collect the least amount everywhere according to the most stringent locations. So Canada actually tends to have some of the most stringent privacy policies, and we've catered the collection of the data and the length, so we only keep that data for 21 days. So if you've if you're not part of an incident and they're not going to put a flag on you, after 21 days, that information is completely removed from our systems, completely removed, so you can never see it again. And then if there is an incident, then they can keep that information for over 21 days, and that's the flag network that gets shared.
Got it.
And so, what we've done is we've actually now are rolling that out, the 21-day policy, across everywhere in the U.S. We used to keep it for 90 days. We're bringing that down to 21 days. We weren't told to. There was no specific push to do that. We're just doing that because we're seeing, the privacy environment is always constantly changing, and we're trying to be the most privacy aware. Yeah. And then outside of privacy, we believe that's the right balance. A lot of the patrons that go to the bars also believe that's a excellent balance. But outside of that, we also want to make sure that the system is not abused. Right? It's still an informational system, meaning that if somebody puts a flag on you, it doesn't mean that other venue can't let you in or not. It's just an informational system. So that each venue can decide whether or not let you in. But we want to make sure that information that there is accurate and that it's not subjective to abuse. So we actually allow every patron as well. If you're on the flag network, we make it really easy for you to find out what information we have on you, why you're on the flag network, and if that information is incorrect, you can dispute it. And most places, according to to privacy legislation, you can have up to 30 business days or 60 business days to dispute something. We try to do it within 5. Like we're trying to compact things. We're trying to make it quicker. We're trying to be more responsive to ensure that this is not a black box to each patron, that they understand how it's used, but they also understand that if there is ever something that isn't right or maybe subjective to abuse, that they can have power off of their own information. So we allow them to dispute any flags, which then we will contact the venue on their behalf, make sure that there's some sort of resolution. If there isn't, we get involved, right? But we also make sure that if we ever have any venue where they are abusing the system, we will take them off of the flag network, and they won't be part of that anymore.
Got it. So it's not permanent. It's and I love that. And to finish on that, because I do want to ask, I do want us to move to a different topic. The shared flag network, it's actually, from what I understood from you, an outstanding effort. Not only our technology is just a medium. At the end of the day, it's the community, the clients, right? The venues, they are the ones at the end of the day using our technology to actually support each other, the community. And I love the behavioral changes, those kind of things, right? And privacy-wise, we actually go beyond what is compliant. We are going beyond what it's actually asked as a compliance standard by the authorities. That goes without saying. We're actually trying to anticipate and be even more customer-oriented in that sense, and making sure that we're doing things always in the right way. And I think that's pretty cool.
I think some of it, just to kind of hit it real fast, is we come from that space. And even when I came over, I came from scanning technology and archiving data retention policies. Like I came from that background, so my lens on that was very sensitive to what are we doing with that data? Are we sure we're, and so we actually put a lot of effort on that side, coming from the point of view of a patron, and what should be and what makes sense and what would I be okay with, based on the fact that I'm a sensitive person to someone's having my information. So we put a lot of effort into that because of our sensitivity to that plight. But at the same time, we got to balance that with the safety. So the minimum we need to do to ensure there's the safety and accountability, that's what we focus on.
Awesome. I believe that we are very much aware on how Patronscan was born, the reasons behind that, the whole evolution. We talked about the technology per se, the challenges around ID validation, and how much we learn from it. We talked about the shared flag network, the value to the community, to the venues, and to the patrons, right? All of that. We talked about how we deal with privacy, for example, right? And responsibly and always ahead of what is expected, right? Or beyond expectations, right? And always compliant to the authorities and everything. Loved all of that. Let's look to the future now, okay? And I have actually one question for you and one question for you. Both of them are related to the future, okay? And for you, Alberto, I want to talk about not the future of Patronscan per se, because that I'm gonna ask Jason if that's okay. But I want to talk about the future of this industry. What we're talking about here, you as an innovative entrepreneur, what's going to happen 10 years from now? Now we know that fake IDs are just like at a very high level, so sophisticated, right? And thinking about what Patronscan stands for, right? Building safe and trustworthy relationships.
Safe environments and trustworthy communities.
Safe environment and trustworthy communities, right? And all of that. Okay, what is 10 years from now, and how Patronscan is going to be prepared for that?
Yeah, at its essence, we're still going to need safe environments and trustworthy relationships.
That's not going to change.
No, that's not
changing.
The method and how you do that will change. There's no doubt about that. We're seeing a lot of innovation happening in the identity space. So physical IDs are becoming digital. You're seeing that with the Apple Wallet. You're seeing that with the Google Wallet. A lot of states in the U.S. already have picked, Apple and Google to do their digital ID. There's other states in the U.S. that are doing their own version of digital IDs. There's going to be, here in Canada as well, provinces in Australia. So digital IDs are going to come.
Do you think this is going to be standard 10 years from now?
Oh yeah,
all over.
I think there will always the board. Yeah, I think there's going to always be a segment that's going to kind of resist a bit, and prefer to have their physical IDs. But I think you're going to see it become more and more prevalent that people use. It's so convenient, number one, and you can carry it with you fairly easy, and it also make it easier for you to do business with organizations. So old brick and mortar organizations where you go in and you actually create that trustworthy relationship there. Perfect example would be a bank. You go to a bank in the past and you actually apply for an account there, and you apply for a line of credit and credit card all in person. And then they would issue you that credit and that money. Things like that are being done all online now, and COVID really exacerbated that, where that identity validation is no longer needs to be done face to face. It can be done online. Banking is just one example, but there's multiple examples now. Anywhere where you have to exchange, money for physical goods or extend credit, anything like that. Identity validation will also have to be done. So that part is not going anywhere. The fraud space just keeps increasing. That's not going anywhere either. Identity theft is now a bigger problem in the United States than the entire drug trade in terms of dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That was from a stat from the FBI.
Wow.
So identity theft is not really going to go anywhere, especially as you make it easier with digital ways to do things. So the way I see in the industry is that there's going to be, the need to have solutions to verify identities and combat identity fraud is going to just be, a bigger and bigger space. Now, how that's done, via digital IDs, maybe it's integrating with known knowledge bases around the world to see, is this individual a real person, or is it a made up person? Is this real individual that we know is real? Is this person that's presenting these credentials the real person whose credentials belong to? There's multiple ways we can do that. And we ourselves as an organization are looking into that and how we continue to innovate on that front. And in the terms of the safe spaces, I think that'll always continue too. When we first came to market, we had to introduce the product. A lot of times we'd have to go to a bar and nightclub and say, this is what this product does.
Kind of pretty much explain what it is and then educate the
you had
client,
to educate the client, and a lot of them were like, well, why do I need this? Where nowadays, I think the education part is less. I think a lot of bars and nightclubs understand what an ID scanner does and a product like ours, Patronscan, can do for them. So I really think that is just going to get adopted more and more in those places, as well as outside of bar and nightclub and other industries where you're seeing violent theft, where now you want to have this unknown visitor management through identity validation at the door before you let them in. That's just going to get bigger and bigger. So we're primed to continue in that space, but the way in which we do it is going to change. It might not be a physical ID that we're scanning anymore. It might be a digital ID. It might be different things, different technologies we use. And that's what I see in the industry.
That's fantastic. So the need for safety, the need for safe spaces and trustworthy relationships, that's not going to move. No. It's always going to be there. But how we, facilitate that, help that, this is where Patronscan is going to be always ahead of the game, right?
Yeah.
Making sure and adapting to whatever it is, because we still have the same objective. I love that. I really like that. Awesome. Okay, so but that's the industry, and of course a little bit of Patronscan from Alberio. From your perspective, Jason, what do you think is the future of Patronscan as a company?
Well, you started talking about the 10 years, what that looks like, and I'm gonna probably move that backwards to this year / into the near future. And we've identified a few areas to go after. Some of it is, if you've read the book Blue Ocean, and that's what ID scanning was 10, 15 years ago. It was a blue ocean. There wasn't anybody using it. So it was a new space, and we seem to drive towards those new spaces. And that's when he starts talking about unknown visitor management becomes something that's actually a term we've even coined, where we got into, and IVAC is one of those areas. So identity validation access control, or any identity verification access control. IVAC is kind of a term that we talk about quite a bit, and it all started from something as simple as here's the challenge. We saw an increase in crime and theft in a certain area. Do you guys have something that can help with this? So having our experience in other industries, the police and different people from the city and different people from the business units said, we have this problem. Is there anything you can do to solve it? So quickly we thought of identity validation at the door. So whether it's age-gated products, and along that way, we had extreme success with our first engagements with it. Over 96% in some cases of reduced theft, and 100% of catching the person if they do something. So it was just kind of a little bit of again, back to that launch code. If I bring them in, it's that custom experience, that iterative experience of building a product by listening to our customers. So we didn't stop. We made, in one of our other locations that we did, we made over 150 nuanced changes to our product in a very short amount of time to get it to be effective and work at the level that it needed to. Wow. So that area is a big focus for us, because to us it's a blue ocean. It's something that's not getting better. It's sad to say. We've seen an increase all over North America, and you can look to San Francisco as they're starting to put chains on doors to things. Yeah. So now you have to wave down someone to run over and undo the door. We actually have been into a bunch of convenience stores where they're actually selling alcohol or age-gated product, and they have a full-time police officer that is positioned there all day long. They got security guards they're not allowed to chase, but they're there, and they're not being very effective in most cases because of the fact that there's some of that no chase policy. There's under $1,000 misdemeanor where there's not even so I'd say there's a lot of things contributing to this, but it's escalating. And the solutions that are there are full of friction, where ours is a lot less friction. And again, it's back to the prevention accountability. So that's kind of in the short term. I see that as a big opportunity for us, and we're seeing it as a blue ocean to go play in. Not a lot of sharks in there yet, so we can get a first mover advantage. And it's something, again, by listening to our clients, listening to the people in the field, and not being satisfied with what we got off the shelf right now, but how does it need to evolve to capture the hearts and minds of the people that are using the product, making it less frictionless or most frictionless it can be, while still accomplishing the goals that are set out by the business. So that's probably a big area. And then Alberio spoke a lot about this, is on the fraud side. So the fraud side is huge, and there's so many different avenues you can go down that road. But you can talk about the online fraud side of it, where you're doing an e-commerce kind of situation, but you need to validate that that person is who they say they are. So there's a whole piece on that. And we talk about big things that are being stolen, like houses, like people are doing title insurance fraud. $900 and some $1,000 house that was stolen in Toronto, based on a fake ID. So account setups at banks. So you obviously go into the bank to validate yourself or start an account. There's always the KYC and AML stuff that people have to do, and they ask you some, knowledge-based questions and stuff like that. But honestly, if you just validated the ID and the ID was fake, it kind of solves all your problems up front. So all these areas are kind of areas we're focused on, but I kind of spoke to about 2 or 3 where we're hitting now. But the future of it always goes back to innovation, always goes back to listening to our clients, getting the feedback, iterating fast, and then taking what we've learned and bringing that to the table and knowing what we're good at. So we know where our little secret sauce is on building that system, and we're really going to fight hard for this piece of it. But how we accomplish it could be using our imagination a little bit and reaching out to, whether it be partners or reaching out to different products to kind of build into it. But at the end of the day, it's the outcome that people are looking for. As long as we're building towards that, that's what we want to deliver. So that's success to us, is they come to us with a problem. We don't just look at it, well, we have a thing and we're going to sell you the thing. No, we're looking to get your outcome the way you want. So that's why we don't stop. That's why we don't rest. That's why we don't just sit with a product, put 10,000 and, and just sell what we have. We're constantly addressing those micro nuances to address the problem at that level that we can, at least from our level. Again, we know what we're good at. So we're not the company so if we go back to access control, we're not building locks. We're not building the locking mechanisms, but we are tying into them. So if someone else is doing that, so we know our part of it, but at the end of the day, working with those providers gives us the best chance of success for the client.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole cycle of innovation is endless, right? If you think about that. And sometimes people see innovation as this, those big chunks of innovation. Of course that happens, right? But the way I see, the way that Patronscan was designed, and of course, Launchcode was designed because it's part of what Patronscan, right? They came out of Patronscan, as we usually say, is that Patronscan innovation is at the DNA of what Patronscan is. And listening to the customer and understanding the customer all the time, getting that feedback real time. And I love the the reality of, like we the first time we tested it was like 10%, the next day was like 60. And then like short period of time where you grab that information, you got to change things, you got to innovate, got to do differently, always towards a goal, a purpose, as an objective. And then it's just now part of our DNA, right? Which it is. Innovation is what actually enables Patronscan and Launchcode to succeed. Yeah. Right? No, that's I love it. Lovely, beautiful. Thank you so much, folks. Yeah, it was a great conversation. For sure we're going to come back because there are so many layers that we could go a little bit deeper. Right? So I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, thanks for hosting us. It's a beautiful facility.
Yeah. Once again, he really liked the facility, right?
Yeah, he really likes the facility. So do I.
You can see that.
Very happy. Thanks for putting this together. And yes, we're scratching the surface on some of the things that we can do. So
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to future conversations.
Yeah. Thank you for the passion, folks.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so that's it for today's Launchcast. As usual, you got to remember to like, to comment, to share with someone. Maybe you have friends that they own bars, maybe convenience stores, and then maybe they're having some issues with some patrons. And then make sure that you refer Patronscan to them, show what we can do, show how that technology can help them. Just share the podcast, because that's all we talked about today. Make sure you subscribe to the channels, to YouTube. We also have a Spotify channel, highly important. And you can listen to the podcast there. Also Apple Podcasts, right? So Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Don't miss any of the episodes. So the links are in the description. The links of a Patronscan. Subscribe to our newsletter, Launch Post. Of course, it keeps growing. It's a beautiful newsletter. It's bi-weekly. And you can do that on our LinkedIn page. And please follow us on other social channels. And thanks for being with us. I hope you guys enjoyed. So see you the next time.